Yeah, thank you very much. Well, first of all, thanks for the friendly introduction, and maybe you feel the same way. For living in a post-industrialized society, is there a better illustration than this area here in an old mail train station with old brick buildings right next to cooling buildings out of yellow bricks between steel gray early times bridge where a subway sometimes goes by. A better image for living in a post-industrialized society, I could not imagine it. And the basis for our post-industrialized society is the digitization, but also artificial intelligence that mirrors human intelligence, or puts a mirror in front of human intelligence. So it's unconscious algorithms that are almost capable to pretend to have a consciousness. And this mirror is something we don't use nearly enough to understand that our intelligence, that we mostly celebrated as logical thinking and rational thinking, we find that in the machine now. And now it really depends on all the other forms of intelligence that we also have. And that's the reason I see for neuronormality becoming less and less interesting, and that the interesting in neuronal plurality is growing. And we already see that technology companies, especially when it's about cybersecurity, that they really like to use neurodivergent people. A rule of thumb could be who wants to secure systems thinks in lists, who attack systems thinks in images, or they think in images. So thinking in images is a different kind of human intelligence. That's really difficult to predict, which is why we have a cat and mouse game and an arms race between hacking attacks and cybersecurity. And that is a work field for a lot of neurodivergent people. And I am head of the Center for Neurodivergent Science in Hamburg. And we could show in studies that neurodivergent people think more in images than others. It doesn't mean that all neurodivergent people think in images and that all neurotypical people only think in lists and language. But the quotes are different, so the numbers are different. So if I speak about neurodivergent people, then I speak of people on the autism spectrum, ADD spectrum, with Tourette's, people with dyscalculation, people who can't calculate, can't have trouble with letters. So I could just continue listing people, all kinds of people. Every week, I learn a new kind of neurodivergence. What is the new thing now? The new thing is that those people, they're not ashamed because of their neurodivergence anymore. They talk about it. They don't remain silent. So I've got synesthesia. Why was it difficult for me to say that? Well, I think differently sometimes, and I got a lot of trouble for that. So I thought maybe I should keep silent. It's probably a mutation on chromosome 16. So my senses are mixed up. Every letter has a color. Every day of the week has a color. Every month has its own color. It's also that melodies have forms. They can have a surface texture. And what's helpful for me is that chords have different tastes. So I don't necessarily have to eat something if I have a keyboard or a guitar. It's a taste festival, the same as eating. It can be useful, not always. So I want to say, speaking about neurodivergence was not an obvious thing to do. To be neurodivergent also means that between you and other people, there is kind of a glass wall. It's difficult to make it exemplary. I can just tell that it was unclear to me. I love math because it's so colorful. But I also like calligraphy, letters. I like reading. I always liked reading because to me, letters are colorful. But that also leads to, well, that some calculations, I still notice it sometimes when I'm a bit tired, they don't make sense. Color-wise, I get different results that fit better color-wise. But it might be to my disadvantage, and it's not always practical or helpful. The same with words. I have an advantage. I have an additional memory channel, so it's easier to memorize things for me, but I have interferences. So the word Gleisdreieck, it starts with a G. It's a blue letter, easy thing. But then there is Dreieck, which means triangle. It's a different thing because a 3 is red. And the starting letter of triangle is yellow. So the word triangle and the image of a triangle, it doesn't work together. So I always get stuck at Gleis. So it's not easy for me. It sounds easy. And many people said, well, I'm so jealous of fireworks of color, of fireworks of senses. But it's tiring quickly. Everything that has positive potential has negative potential as well, has deficits as well. And for me, it's tiredness. I sometimes can't see well anymore if I had too much fireworks in my senses. And for me, that also means that I think I have a good idea how people on the autism spectrum or ADHD spectrum, how they feel, how they can be really tired, even if something great happens, when people say, well, you should be happy, right? But you are sometimes just tired. You can just go home or freeze up or be really impolite, and all three options are not nice. You want to avoid that, and that's what neurodivergent people share, what connects us. We have a special kind of attention. It can have different forms. People with autism, the orienting system can be better, so maybe they can find or understand many details quicker or better than others. Studies found that people with autism made 4 times less mistakes than neurotypicals. So a lot of those are in IT because of that. But not only in IT, this is important. Historians, all kinds of sciences, they need details. There is no knowledge field where people with autism, with their special view on the world, can't bring a lot to it. It's similar for people with ADHD or on the ADHD spectrum. Those are people who maybe are more tolerant to risk. So that means a lot of CEOs in good companies are people on this spectrum, but also in a prism, there is many people with ADHD because risk tolerance is not always compatible with others expect of us. So the trouble is the standards and the expectations. And the new thing in the neurodivergence movement is not saying those people are wrong, but the frameworks are wrong. The environment is wrong. So their personality development. Thank you very much. So they are paying a really high price for masking their neurodivergence. And this masking can lead to them not really developing or showing their personality. They don't develop properly cognitively. Their potentials get lost and their soul gets damaged. And so that's why it's really important that we talk more about this. And if we talk more about the generations, one property of Gen Z is that they are not just more brave when talking about the neurodivergence, but they demand. They really demand participation and to design our society, to help designing our society. So it's a new phase in parallel with AI, and I think there's a theoretical bridge I want to build today. Yesterday, I had a talk with Angelina Berger, who wrote an excellent book about ADHD, Kirmes im Kopf in German, which means carnival in your head. And I think that's the path we should take. These people can participate, they can enlighten us. Neurotypical people can really profit from understanding how feeling and thinking belong together. Many people distinguish this, but in reality, feeling and thinking are indistinguishable, neurologically at least, and individual and society cannot be separated as well. And those are the chances and the potential that the neurodivergent movement brings to all of us. Me, myself, and well, we are here talking about Gen X, Y, and Z. And what's my approach here? In August, I'm getting a diploma, kind of, for 40 years working at a university. So for 40 years, I could see the generations come and go. And first, I have to say that our studies show that all those generations, the millennials and so on, the separation into generations, that's artificial. Because in reality, in the averages or medians of all these generations, they differ a lot less than between the people within a generation. We have so many different people in each generation that this separation is really artificial. But still, we have properties that did change, and that's the environment, that's living conditions, that's the digitization and inclusion. If I think back to seminars with Gen X, then in front of me, I see a lot of color, a lot of colorful fashion. There were goth people right next to grunge people, next to hip-hop looks and heavy metal. So different hairstyles. There was a lot of diversity, but it wasn't neurodiverse. At least no one dared to talk about it publicly. But it wasn't really culturally diverse. That changed with Gen Y. We could see, for example, just look at the names. Yeah, you had the lists of participants, and suddenly there were names where you didn't know, is that a man or a woman's name? Because you just didn't know which culture it came from. So diversity is increasing, and more people came to me and asked, so I have a disadvantage, how do we handle that? And then there was Gen Z, and I have to say, a lot more is happening in that direction. And we have to see that our perception of intelligence is changing. So Gen Z is often called unable to live, that intelligence is going down. You could believe that, but you could also wonder how smart is it to call someone unintelligent? I had something last year. I found a book where our scientific method was put into 3 words. The book was called, focus, der Wahrheit verpflichtet, which means obliged to the truth. And that's the core of science. I don't have the feeling as a scientist to own the truth, but I'm obliged to the truth. And that's a book I can really recommend from Kamala Harris. And it's a plaidoyer for diversity, for handling disadvantage as well, and for inclusion. I really found that book intelligent, and then someone came and called this woman retarded, stupid as a rock. And that person, who also, wherein the pandemic, recommended to inject disinfectant. I'm pretty sure you know who I'm talking about. And in those moments, I really wish that all people were wearing a T-shirt with their IQ, because then it would be obvious what's going wrong here. I always imagine an advertisement. A moderator comes and says, "Lel, you think you are smart, but without a test. But that's not smart to think that at all. Without a test, it's not worth anything." And then a person comes who looks really smart. You need a lot of fantasy now. So, yeah, I have a high IQ. I can do whatever I want. I got it black on white. Trust me. And in German, that's a rap. So I have a big IQ. To do something necessary, what for? I got it black on white without hard work or blood, sweat, and tears. I don't have to do much. I just have to name my IQ. Who wants to understand what I can say? And then moderator, there's no good thing without you doing it. And now you measure your IQ. Maybe that would be a solution, but how intelligent is it to have an IQ test? How barrier-free are IQ tests? Did you think on that ever? Are IQ tests really showing what we think they are, especially from the neurodivergence movement and looking at AI? It becomes obvious we have to rethink intelligence. And also, we have to understand the roots and the basics of AI are not always, well, you always think of Binet, who wanted to help special or retarded kids. But no, he was actually someone who just measured the skulls and had the idea that kids with bigger skulls are more intelligent than kids with smaller skulls. And he thought that the prejudices of teachers are at fault to give bad grades to kids with bigger skulls. And so he developed IQ tests or intelligence tests. And it makes sense because there is Francis Galton. He was the first one who developed intelligence tests, a social Darwinist who developed eugenics and had the idea that neurodivergent people, they shouldn't be even born. And nobody talks about this topic, but there's many people who never were able to do an IQ test. But because they were just called to have, assumed to have a low IQ, they're never born. For example, some genetic disorders. But some of those have high master degrees and the like. But the interesting point is that the same Francis Galton, that was 1904 when he founded eugenics, and he wanted to provide evidence how stupid the masses are. And he went to a farmer's place, and there were 800 people there present, most of them lay people, and he collected all the estimations of some value, and he then calculated the average to prove how stupid the masses are. But the average was closer than the estimate of experts. And always, if someone wants to prove something and it becomes falsified, then it's more trustworthy.
Nowadays, we know in science that there is an intelligence of the mass or the wisdom of the populace, but there's always a problem too. In 1941, Salman Hash discovered this. He found that people tend to People tend to put their own opinion, despite their better knowledge, below what the mass, the swarm intelligence tells them. And even if you know for a fact that something's wrong, you can do a test that you're told something is correct. Then you take a whole test group and you ask what is 2 + 2, and you say 4, and the person who's a control group who doesn't know, he also said 4. But then you can create situations where you give the wrong answer, where the mass gives the wrong answer, and this person then also, on average, most of the time, also said the wrong answer. So 87% said the wrong answer together with the mass of people all the time, and a certain percentage said it most of the time. So you can talk about the intelligence of the mass as well as the lack of it. So we now have algorithms that don't elevate this intelligence, this swarm intelligence. But they tell me that if I put out a certain opinion, it will give me a lot of clicks. These are don't be fooled. These are power structure. So I will bend my own opinion in order to get more clicks, and this leads to polarization. And is there a treatment for this problem? And I believe neurodivergent people are that remedy. They learned that they don't get far if they follow the mass. They are prepared to stand to their own opinion, even if they're called stupid, if they're called uneducated, disabled, just like Kamala Harris. These people are courageous. I'm always thinking of
Emperor's New Clothes.
The Emperor's New Clothes. So you usually see this much more with neurotypical people than with neurodivergent. And that's why these people are sometimes unpopular, because they don't follow the mass and they don't feel very conformant. But often this is what our society needs. This is what good AI needs, because they need an independent opinion that sets itself apart from the intelligence of the mass and has very little correlation with what other people think. And every time AI goes wrong, be it racism, discriminating against disabled people, sexism, these are all things that the mass thinks. And it's very expensive to try to prompt this out of the AI after the fact. And it takes a lot of work and resources. And that's why I would love a rethink of this problem. We have mechanisms here that will destroy our democracy in the long run. And with AI, we have a technology that is also environmentally very expensive. Just the cooling cost alone is exorbitant. It takes $250 million just to keep the systems running from an electricity point of view. I think the technology is awesome, but it shouldn't be in the hands of a few tech billionaires. And we should think if we need EU regulation that puts a limit to this. And this would actually lead to more work, for more jobs for neurodivergent people. And if I think about this, he's rapping about the urgency of how to bring about this change. The paradoxy is grotesque. It's burlesque, like the aristocracy. Techno billionaires are attacking. They don't care about your rights. They will destroy the state, and the poor people will pay for it. It's all about the money. It's about the intelligence of the people. Multipolarity is all about multi-perspective. And if you play with democracy, it's about losing it. So think about the wisdom of the people. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.